Hang on, guys. We're going to be on the air in about 2 minutes. This is going to be a very interesting show. Stay tuned. Breaking news. All right, this is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco. I'm Jamal Dajani. Today we are going to talk about power, money, and the politics of fear. With us in the studio again is Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi. Welcome again to Arab Talk.
Thank you for having me. I think it's really important for us to discuss these issues.
We will be discussing several interconnected cases: the disappearance of Saudi dissident and journalist Jamal Khashoggi, a follow-up to our previous discussions on the silencing of academia at U.S. colleges, now that the organizations and their funders have been identified. And I hate to tell you, our listeners, that we've been telling you all along. I hate to tell you that we told you so, but we told you so. First, the big news. The Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, and this is in the San Francisco Bay Area, which includes the Peninsula, Marin County, and Sonoma counties, also known as the JCF, has been consistently funding far-right and anti-Muslim hate groups across the country as far back as 2003. Documents uncovered last week have revealed. And the JCF has been funding the notorious Canary Mission Blacklist through its supporting foundation, the Helen Diller Family Foundation, which has in fact been contributing millions of dollars to anti-Muslim far-right and right-wing campus-based groups for the past 15 years. We were thinking just this is recent, but it's not recent, ladies and gentlemen. It has been 15 years with a this is the 2017, their 2017 budget of over $240 million and assets totaling over $1 billion. The JCF is one of the largest Jewish philanthropy organizations in the world, describing their mission as a philanthropic catalyst connecting Jewish people in the Bay Area of all ages, backgrounds, and perspectives to the power we have as a community to improve the world. But according to an excellent investigative report by Stephanie Sikora, and she had a closer examination, this is an investigative report, and a closer examination of the organization's financial documents also reveals a bevy of donations given to right-wing groups. Among the beneficiaries of the JCF's far-right funding, including notorious organizations such as Turning Point USA, the Tea Party Patriots Foundation, anti-gay groups such as the Heritage Foundation, and Southern Poverty Law Center designated anti-Muslim groups such as ACT for America and the Center for Security Policy. Ladies and gentlemen, these organizations have received in excess of $300 million. Let me repeat that. This is not chump change. $300 million over the course of the years that were investigated. And some of these groups that contribute to Israeli illegal settlements in the West Bank, which are under, of course, illegal international law and have been repeatedly condemned by the United Nations. They appear in the JCF's report as grantees. Organizations such as the Central Fund of Israel, which also serves as a pass-through for funding Canary Mission, according to a previous report and the previous discussions we've had, another revelation in the forward article that appeared last week Friends of the Shabbat of Hebron, which serves only Israeli occupation soldiers and the notoriously violent Hebron settlers. Friends of Ir David, the Hebron Fund, and the Israel Independence Fund, they all received money from the Jewish Community Federation in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I don't know what to go. I mean, we're going to go through the list. I have only named very few names on the list, and we'll name the other names because this is an incredibly big story. Were you shocked by this report, Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi?
No, I wasn't shocked. I was, as you said, Jamal, we actually have seen the connections. We've seen the connections in the number of groups that have been targeting me, targeting Ahmed Studies, targeting us, targeting academics on various university campuses, targeting community groups, trying to basically put out of business anybody who speaks up around questions of justice in for Palestine and connects it to questions of justice for all. This has been really a silencing McCarthyite campaign to silence, intimidate, bully, put out of business, destroy the livelihood, destroy careers, cause people health problems, cause all sorts of things. This has been going on. What is to me, and this is just came out today, so I actually started looking at it, and I started looking at the list, and I haven't done all the analysis that I would like to do, but it's very revealing.
I'll give you and our listeners another taster. And some of these organizations, of course, you are very familiar with.
Yes.
Amcha Initiative.
Amcha Initiative.
They received funding from them.
Okay, so
American Freedom. You want to say?
Let me one at a time.
Okay.
Amcha Initiative received $100,000. I'm not even talking about the dealer, because the Jewish Federation can just say, "Oh, dealer, we do not know. We're just funneling and so on." This is the Jewish Federation itself. According to the report by Scora, Amcha Initiative received $100,000 in 2013. In 2013, Amcha Initiative waged a very long campaign against me and against students in November 2013, continues to proceed to undermine, actually accused us falsely of glorifying the murder of Jews, accused us of anti-Semitism, and continued to accuse me of fraternizing with terrorists and called Palestinian universities terrorists based on some kind of a report of Anti-Defamation League, which is discredited and disreputed. And they continued to accuse me of misuse of university public funds, demanded an audit. The university conducted 3 audits of me. That all of these attacks have actually been following me until today, part of my career. Also, by the way, the Jewish Federation has supported the Lawfare Project, which is now suing me and the university.
David Horowitz Freedom Center. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, David Horowitz is, historically, David Horowitz was one of the people, which is not listed here, but in 2000, actually, the first time I was attacked.
No, he received $125,000.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about even before, because the dates are listed here. Like, I know, my first introduction to David Horowitz was in 2006, and I was attacked. I was at the University of Michigan, and I was called in the evening by the dean on my cell phone saying to me, "What is this? You can only speak as a citizen. You cannot speak in the name of the university," because I signed a statement that was put together by my former students at New York University, who basically said that Israel should not be bombing the hell out of Lebanon in 2006, during the summer of 2006. And so that's the first time I've seen it. He was the editor of Front Page. But then if you fast forward with David Horowitz, in 2010, 2011, David Horowitz started aggressively pushing his program of Islamofascism Week.
I have campuses. A correction, actually.
Yeah,
this is a recent. Actually. This is only a recent offering, but grant he received. Mm-hmm. But the total that the David Horowitz Freedom Center, he received $1,386,300 since 2003.
If you add them up.
And
this is what we know. This is what we know from the IRS filing of the forms of this federation. There may be a lot of other private filing that's going, but if we look at it, I know about the attacks on academics. I know about attacks against students. I know about attacks about certain, but even from my own experience and our experience at San Francisco State, I can track that, wow, Amcha attacked us, and this year they've been rewarded. They got $100,000. There was the Simon Wiesenthal was also participating. They got 6,500 in 2013, but in 2014 they got 7,000. This is from the Jewish Federation. In 2015 they got another 5,000. No, 700. Yeah, another 5,000. No, yeah. Okay, and then it goes up and up and up. You go back, the Zionist Organization of America, 2016 gets $325,000. So it's kind of every single time they escalate the attacks against people who speak up for justice in for Palestine, there is the reward. You escalate the attack, they give them a little bit of seed money to start their project, and then when they seem to actually be doing the job, the hatchet job against us and bullying us and smearing us, they get more money. So the question actually remains, and we can talk more about their survey. The question is, why a group that is supposed to be respectable, like the Jewish Federation of San Francisco, that is supposed to be one of the major respectable community groups, why are they funding these groups in and out every single day in order to basically destroy our careers? As Brooke Goldstein from Lawfare said, we are going to inflict massive punishment.
Well, because they have the money. They have the money. They believe they have the money, they have the power, and they're using the politics of fear.
Right.
And this is the title of our show. I want to remind our listeners who have joined us late, and this is, ladies and gentlemen, something that we've been talking about for many months. And last week, we only touched on the tip of the iceberg. And then this week, now we come to a bigger revelation about the intensity, the money behind all these groups. And so just to remind our listeners, the big story here is that the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, which really covers the entire peninsula, Marin County, Sonoma counties, also known as the JCF, has been consistently funding far-right and anti-Muslim hate groups across the United States as far back as 2003. And you've mentioned this is a reputable organization, and let me quote from its mission statement. And its mission statement says it's a philanthropic catalyst connecting Jewish people in the Bay Area of all ages, backgrounds, and perspectives to the power we have as a community to improve the world. It's very interesting. It sounds a very good statement and very benign. Yet, now we find out, and this is thanks to the excellent, I have to say, excellent investigative report. And you could Google her name, Stephanie Skora, on Medium, and she was able to obtain documents, tax documents, and nonprofit organizations. Actually, I haven't even started to talk about the tax benefits, because this is all defrauding the American taxpayer. You know, you think that this money is going to charitable causes, and instead they're going to attack, and spread Islamophobia in this country and attack academics and students across the United States. Yeah. So I think the IRS should step in and investigate this group. This is number one. I'm telling people, and I'm not going to stop. Yeah. The IRS should investigate this group. That's number one. Number two, there is here a class action lawsuit for all those people who got affected and had their careers ruined. Palestinian American professors fired from universities or under attack, students who have been under attack. So again, this is the big story. We are talking about an organization with an annual budget of $240 million and assets totaling over $1 billion. This is not chump change.
Serious money.
Serious money. And it is one of the largest organizations in the entire world, not in the United States. This is described as one of the largest Jewish philanthropy organizations in the world. And again, now we have all the paperwork. We have all the documents going back for almost 15 years. And this organization has contributed $300 million over the course of these years to these different organizations that we've been naming one by one. Organizations stretching to colonial settlers in Hebron who have been basically attacking Palestinians day in, day out, to organizations like Canary Mission, which has been defaming the reputation of students and academics.
Pam Geller and Robert Spencer.
That's right. Organizations
which have placed the ads on the Muni buses here in San Francisco, basically defaming and attacking Arabs and Muslims. And they have, I mean, people have seen the ads all over
Pamela
the buses,
Geller, Pamela Geller has received $375,000 from the Helen Diller Family Foundation. We have the names, we have the amounts, we have the years. They've been hiding this for years. They've been deceiving the public. They've been deceiving the taxpayers. They have a skeleton office like Canary Mission in Beit Shemesh outside Jerusalem with no one there, and someone hiding, a whole army hiding behind their computers, posting people's students' pictures and academics and lying and spreading lies basically on the internet with no accountability. Because, people say, well, we don't know where these people are, who's behind this website? Who are these shady characters behind it?
A bunch of crazy people.
A bunch of crazy people. Oh, it might be coming from Israel. Well, the source is right here. The source is less than a mile away from our studio in San Francisco. And I know they're listening to this show. And I know they've read all these articles. And they know that we've made an invitation for their representatives to come to Arab Talk and discuss it.
What are they going to say?
Let them come, defend themselves.
No, but I think this is the reason they're not actually responding to you, because what is it what are they going to say about it? What are they going to say about somebody like David Horowitz, who plastered posters all over campuses, defaming professors, defaming students, accusing us of being supporters of terrorism, accusing us of Jew hatred all over? Well, how do you defend something like this? I mean, what is it that they're going to say? And this is very clear. It's not 1 year, it's not 2 years, it's not 3 years, it's a continuing pattern. This is something, my concern, Jamal, I have to tell you, is that, to me, I want to know, I'm concerned, as somebody who's being attacked, is what is the relationship of my university to these groups?
Well, we're going to get there, because I think I want our listeners to understand the severity of this issue. And we're getting questions, we're getting questions on Facebook Live, and one of the questions is, has the funding breached any law? I believe so.
Of course.
When you misrepresent your mission statement, and of course these organizations have a 501c3 status, which is a tax-exempt status, and their contributors receive tax deduction because supposedly they're donating to an organization to help, feed the poor or educate or offer education to children, and they're using the money basically to harass.
That's not enough to cover up lies. That's not enough to cover up invitation to violence. Promotion of violence. That is, sometimes people say, well, speech is protected and so on, and we say this is the weaponizing free speech in favor of the right wing, but it's also an invitation for violence, and they're actually supporting violent groups.
Well,
right?
these groups are listed as hate groups, by the way.
So they're listed as hate groups, and the Southern Poverty Law Center has already documented David Horowitz, Richard Spencer, Pam Geller, Daniel Pipes of the Middle East Forum. Every one of them, they've all been listed, including Geertz of the Netherlands. I mean, they've all been listed as being as agents of Islamophobia, anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, and also anti-black, anti-immigrants. I mean, this is the people who are spewing hate and basically promoting violence. And this foundation has supported them and has also supported organizations that support Israeli soldiers who are going around killing on a rampage.
And colonial settlers.
And colonial settler. And these are, if you want to think about, even if you want to think about the narrow definition of law, it violates the narrow definition.
Well, I mean, talking about the violates, we know, and this is a fact, the U.S. government, the Treasury Department, has shut down, basically, Arab and Muslim organizations.
Multiple, by the way, some of them were sued by one of the groups, Surat al-Din.
Yeah, and because they found a little violation of how they use allegedly how they misused the funding. They were accused of transferring funds to Gaza on that basis, and even though if it was for a
God forbid you try to feed
charitable cause, these organizations were basically, taken to court, and they were shut down.
Right.
And now, when you have an organization which basically sends money to violent settlers in Hebron, isn't that a violation of any of these? When you have an organization that supports a shady website to defame and harass students and harass professors at universities. So I think...
look, Jamal, the Jewish National Fund, they funded the Jewish National Fund of $164,800 in 2015. The Jewish National Fund has been actually the one that is building settlements and the ruins of Palestinian villages. For example, al-Hiran, many people have heard about al-Hiran in Naqab, that has been threatened by destruction again and again and again because the Israelis are building settlement called Hiran that is funded by the Jewish National Fund. We've actually taken pictures. We visited al-Hiran back in 2016 and again in 2018 recently. And this is the Jewish National. This is what the Jewish National Fund is doing. So this is. And I think one of the things that to us, I think to me and to you and many of people who have been read this, who are very well versed in it, we know what is going on. But I think to many of the listeners, I think the question of people say, how could this happen while this is happening? And the problem, and I think that they construct it as a dichotomy, but you can see actually that there is funding of a lot of right-wing. It's not just funding Israel. It's funding a lot of right-wing, homophobic, anti-immigrant, anti-black, anti-women, Tea Party, what have you, white supremacist group. They are funding them. And at the same time, they are also funding Israel. They are funding multiple Zionist groups who are attacking us left and right. And it is exactly what Richard Spencer said in his interview with the white supremacists. He said, well, I'm a white Zionist. I am a white Zionist. So that I don't think there is a contradiction in their positions. These groups are funding a very right-wing agenda that is trying to crush any attempts by anybody to speak up for justice, not only in and for Palestine, but anywhere. Anybody who's speaking up for justice, you are not allowed to do it, because if you are going to speak up, it subverts the right-wing agenda and the hegemony of the right. The other thing is that also what they are trying to do is basically maintain some kind of a Jewish hegemony over any kind of speaking up or any kind of opposition by Jewish groups. So, and what's really great is today, the Forward published a letter from the alumni of the Diller Foundation, the teen alumni, saying that we do not accept this. We do not stand for this. We are completely against this whole anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian, anti-Muslim violence that has been funded by
the Forward is a Jewish publication.
There was the Forward, the Jewish. This is the main newspaper in the U.S. that has been publishing all these exposés. And they published a letter from the teen alumni of the Diller Foundation. It was actually teen and older, who mentioned their names, and they said we're against it totally, and we are critical of the Diller Foundation and so on. So this actually also raises the question of that I always ask: who owns Jewishness? These organizations try to claim that they speak up for all the Jews, and they do not. And so, in other words, the whole question of the struggle against anti-Semitism, these groups are actually contributing to the struggle of anti-Semitism by saying that they speak for all the Jews, and all the Jews speak up for all these violent groups and for race hatred. And that simply is not true. That simply is not true. The letter today from the alumni of the Diller Foundation, people who are speaking up there, the very reporters who are exposing this left and right, whether it is Scora, who is an activist in Chicago, whether you're talking about Cassis, who is a reporter in the Forward, people have been exposing this. It's not me and you. We know this because we've been at the receiving end. We've been victimized.
Well, we've been also talking about this. We've been talking about this on Arab Talk, actually, for several months. And you're right. I mean, when we started to talk about it, it was tidbits coming here and there, and we said this was the tip of the iceberg, and then it started also with the Al Jazeera documentary, which was never released, an article by Electronic Intifada, the article by The Forward, and then now this most recent revelation on the Medium.
Now it's all coming out.
And so it's all coming out.
And we're going to see more.
And
because Jonathan Cassis actually has a list. Every day he publishes on Twitter his handwritten says, I talked to the Jewish Federation of LA. Oh, they've done 1, 2, 3, 4. I've talked to this, I've talked to this. So I think it's really also important to remind our listeners that the reason that when you see something like this does not speak about what the Jewish community is about. It actually speaks about one aspect, one segment of the Jewish community that's right-wing, that's racist, that supports Zionism, that supports the Israeli settler colonial project, and basically whips up attacks after attacks and actually subsidizes, finances bullying and smearing and attacks against us in order for us not to speak of the truth, because they would like to maintain the untruth, the lies that Israel and the Zionists are spreading. So I think it's really, really important that people do not mix up the things. When people say it's not Jews who are doing it, these are people who are claiming to speak up for all the Jews, and they do not.
You're absolutely right. And now let's talk about the connection.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I look at the list,
yes,
and of course I'm familiar with, I would say, 90% of these names. Some names I don't even know these little groups.
Now we have to go and learn about them.
So we have to learn about them. And it's a very dizzying. It's dizzying in the name of the organizations that are involved and who have been collaborating, and then it's dizzying actually in the figure, $300 million. $300 million instead of going to feed the hungry, to educate the uneducated. It was used for smear campaigns, hack jobs, bullying, misinformation,
legal lawsuits,
and this was
litigation until to death.
Exactly, and this was all tax deductible. So there is also that violation, and I'm sure it is something that the IRS needs to investigate. But how can we connect? Because this is also, we have to connect this.
It's very connected, Jamal.
But how can I know it's very connected, but also what I'm mostly concerned about is connecting all of this to academia, because they cannot just do the work from the outside, externally.
Of course not.
And this is a very tempting amount of money, $300 million. And that's why when you see presidents of university shaking in their feet, when you see chairs of departments unable to speak and unable to support a professor under attack, this is not just because you have Canary Mission or you have this or having their name.
This is real money speaking.
We are talking about $300 million. And for those who are joining us late in the game, the big story today, and again, I want to repeat the big story because I know it's very confusing and we've been working and talking about it for a long time. Now we know that the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco in the Peninsula, Marin County, Sonoma counties, has been consistently funding far-right and anti-Muslim hate groups across the United States as far back as 2003, with a annual budget of $240 million and assets totaling over $1 billion. They've spent, and I have to repeat this figure, and this is kind of mind-boggling, $300 million. $300 million to silence academia. Imagine, to defame students. Instead of helping the poor, instead of educating the uneducated,
instead of hiring faculty, funding programs that educate.
So connecting it, taking it back. What's the connection to the universities?
I can speak about. There is multiple levels that you spoke about. First of all, the question of public money. This is public taxpayers' money because they are getting tax exempt, which means they do not pay taxes on it. They're hiding. There is two levels of it. One is that they're getting tax benefits, and two, they are actually getting a shield of respectability because it is tax exempt. Everybody says, well, non-profit, it must be really a great thing because it's not profit seeking, it's not for profit. So there is this kind of respectability shield that's And then you have the connection with the public universities like California State University, University of California. Specifically, I can speak most about San Francisco State, even though I know about other, and I'm very much active in the California Scholars for Academic Freedom, and we have been actually trying to put our universities to task and hold them accountable and make them transparent. But you can see the connections here. Here is a federation that actually many people who are included and involved in it have very intimate relationship, because the Jewish Federation of San Francisco also funds the Jewish Community Relations Council. The Jewish Community Relations Council sat on the President Wang's Task Force for Campus Climate, was involved with the ad hoc group that was set up by Vice President Lolo Hong, have been very much involved in and out. As you know, we've received public records that were given to the lawfare that's suing us. We don't know if we got everything. We've requested multiple public records. We haven't received them. But the records that they have given to the lawfare, they've shared with us some of them. And all of these groups are all over. Jewish National Fund is all over, Jewish Community Relations Council, this and that. And I told you I haven't had time, because I was actually going to compare. I mean, this is what you do as a researcher. You compare. You look at the figures here. You go compare them historically, you compare them to the dates and say, oh, what happened in 2016? Oh, this is Middle East Forum of Daniel Pipes is getting over $46,000 from the Jewish Community Federation. I'm not even talking about the Diller Fund. Now I'm talking about the bigger, because Jewish Community Federation, when we talked last week, they said, oh, Diller, they did this and we will never fund and so on. Now we have all this revelation that the Jewish Federation itself has been funding all of these groups.
So what did
Middle East Forum do in 2016? Middle East Forum launched a very big campaign to ask the president of the university to cancel the agreement we have concluded with An-Najah National University, one of the major Palestinian institutions that educates our children, that educates students, that gives them degrees in order for them to be able to survive in the hostile environment of occupation, where the economy of the Palestinian economy is completely dependent on the Israeli economy, and Israel is still strangulating Palestinian economy. So when you're talking about this, they are actually targeting a small agreement that I have initiated, and I worked with it with a graduate student, Mira Nabilsi. We put it together, and we ended up submitting it, and then it went up the chain of command, and it was vetted. They attacked. This is Middle East Forum. It's being rewarded. It's being given money before, and it's being rewarded afterwards. You're talking about the Amcha initiative that only last March organized so-called group of 60 civil liberties Jewish organizations. They're not civil and they're not liberty, okay? They're neither, okay? And organize it in order to attack me, because I criticized President Wang for saying Zionists are welcomed on campus. And I have been subjected to hate mail, I subjected to threats, I have been subjected to attacks against me, a hostile work environment, and so on. And so the thing is that here you have a public institution, public taxpayers' money. Taxpayers are funding San Francisco State University.
Mm-hmm.
1/3 of the San Francisco State University. This is coming from taxpayers' money. This is coming from money that is also these foundations are being exempt for. So it's kind of like a very interesting loop that's connected with each other.
Well, the question
and that all is working to silence, instead of us allowing us to be able to do what we do best: produce knowledge, educate students who are the first in their homes to go to college, educate students of immigrants, educate poor students, enabling people to even have a little bit of a chance to survive, to learn, to think, and so on. What they are engaging is, as you said, the politics of fear, intimidation, bullying, smearing, under the guise that they're actually fighting anti-Semitism, and they are doing nothing of the sort. What they are actually doing is they are promoting anti-Semitism by claiming that they represent, that these people who are doing these bad things represent all Jews, which is the claim of Zionism. I mean, this is what Zionists claim.
Well, I mean, the big story, of course, to our listeners, if you joined us late, and we've been talking to Dr. Rabab Abdulhadi. This is Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. But now, that tip of the iceberg, that pyramid, is collapsing little by little, and we have more and more information. So we're coming with new information on a daily basis. It started with Canary Mission. Now we know that there's not Canary Mission. You have hundreds of Canary Mission. You have $300 million that were given. And we talked about the connection on college campuses.
Can we just mention two other things, Jamal?
Yeah, but we just get one thing because you can talk about this too. Because obviously, as we find more information, and you mentioned local organizations like here in JCRC and the Jewish Community Federation of San Francisco, and they sit on the hiring committee of the president of San Francisco State University.
And the Human Rights Commission of the City of San Francisco.
And other things. Well, the connection also is what is the financial connection to CSU? What is the financial connection?
Well, we know there is a connection with UC system. Now we are actually trying, I'm saying California Scholars for Academic Affairs is actually trying to find FOIA, try to find out all this information and to basically break this kind of connection and this hold, this control by some of these Zionist groups and other right-wing groups. I mean, they collaborate with each other. I don't think it's an accident that they funded the Tea Party and the Turning Point. I mean, they funded all of these very right-wing groups. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that there is a connection. It's not something like, I think we need to stop saying, oh, wow, we are shocked, and say, what are we going to do about it? But if you think about it, for us, for example, some of the organizations that are not mentioned here, San Francisco Hillel, SF Hillel, SFSU Hillel, that funds Israel on Campus Coalition Fellows, that funds a lot of these groups. You have Simon Wiesenthal Center. Simon Wiesenthal Center is the one that is building the Museum of Tolerance on the ruins of the Mamilla Cemetery, in which members of your family are buried. Okay,
most of the Jerusalemites.
The graves of Jerusalemites, the graves of Palestinians, and so on. And Simon Wiesenthal Center, from 2013, at least in my experience, has been working with the Amcha initiative in order to undermine us and in order to actually accuse us falsely of promoting anti-Semitism, of being anti-Semitic, and of being terrorist supporters. So it's not only that they are actually presenting this kind of image of what Jewishness is about, which is very destructive image, which is very, very negative and incorrect and accurate image. At the same time, also, they are trying to silence anybody who contests that. And they are trying to undermine our educational programs that are trying to educate people about things that people do not know about, that incite Islamophobia, anti-Arab discrimination, and so on.
So we're talking about the power, money, and the politics of fear. Yes. And I want to come back actually later on to talk about your letter to President Wang. But since we are on this topic, and we're talking about the local level, and what I call here is kind of like giving Israel and its surrogates in the United States, as usual, a wink and a nod. Right. The Israel exception.
Carte blanche.
Carte blanche. Yeah. But at the same time, the other big story now, you know, the disappearance of Saudi dissident and journalist Jamal Khashoggi. And this is our other big ally in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia. And so for our listeners, just the most recent update, and we don't have all, of course, I say the disappearance, because, of course, we have a lot of reports, you know, like I was looking recently at a report, and this is from the Middle East Eye publication. They say it's an exclusive that Jamal Khashoggi was dragged from the Consul General's office in Istanbul, in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last Tuesday, before he was brutally murdered by two men who cut up his body. This is according to their report. We don't know if this happened. Nevertheless, Khashoggi has been missing since last Tuesday. He entered the consulate to obtain paperwork so he could remarry. His fiancée was waiting for him outside. Never returned. And this is the last time he was seen, right? Yes. And so today I was watching television, and people have been, of course, pressing the issue, and because he is a high profile, but we know hundreds of dissidents disappear in Saudi Arabia. No one hears or learns about their names. Nevertheless, you know, because he was in Washington, D.C., he comes from a
very
big family. You know, he's Adnan Khashoggi. People might have heard of Adnan Khashoggi, the billionaire. He was an arms dealer.
Right.
And so he wrote for the Washington Post. Right. So we hear about his story. And then they asked President Trump, and he says, well, we'll press them. But, you know, we do billions of dollars with Saudi Arabia.
That's right. Money.
So In my opinion,
maybe we
you
should
cannot
call it the financing of fear,
well,
not just the politics.
Well,
yeah.
we talked about the power, people who has power,
Right.
talked about,
Right.
The money. So you always have to follow the money, and this is the politics of fear. It's the same thing. It's silencing dissent. We criticize all these small countries, third world countries. They have terrible human rights. And one thing I have to say, this comes to mind. I'm sorry if I'm free associating, but I'm sick and tired of those pundits that I keep seeing on television who say that, the disappearance of Jamal Khashoggi now is bringing the Saudi-American relations to crossroads or testing, whatever, as if our relationship with Saudi Arabia was based on human rights
Right.
and justice.
Of course, it was always based on oil.
It's based on oil.
And strategic relations and historically. And secondly, it has been based more recently about, well, not only more recently, it's historically as well, about Saudi Arabia actually playing a very reactionary role in the region in trying to suppress all oppositional movements. We know about Saudi Arabia and its role in suppressing the Egyptian uprising, suppressing the Bahraini uprising, suppressing any uprisings anywhere. Saudi Arabia was also the site from which United States military gathered in order to launch the attack on Iraq in 1991, not only the invasion of Iraq in 2003. More recently, Saudi Arabia has been involved, along with the United States after Trump left, and Israel, in an alliance to try to target and destroy Iran, okay? And everybody talks about Iranian nuclear weapons, and nobody even mentions that Israel has at least 300 nuclear bombs already in their arsenal in Dimona, which is a project again, and this is kind of like the whole thing about the dominant discourses and the need for us to teach about them. It was started by among others, Shimon Peres, who gets constructed as a man of peace. And when he died, President Obama compared him to Mandela. I mean, it's mind-boggling when people say something like this. I mean, you are a well-learned person. You're a Rhodes Scholar. Why is the knowledge stopping in some places and there are blind spots in the knowledge? Aren't you supposed to apply the question of justice everywhere?
No, and they cannot do any, basically they can do no wrong. I mean, Israel, we know whether, I mean...
They get a pass.
You've heard Nikki Haley, she just actually resigned just a day ago, but she would stand in front of the entire world community and say that always Palestinians are...
terrorists.
The terrorists. And when Israel kills, journalists and medics and children, never, ever, ever once condemned.
Holds up a young student who's going there for her research, Lara Al-Qasim. I mean, this is happening all the time. I think the other thing that actually really important, there's two other connections that I think maybe your listeners will relate to. One is the historical question of the disappearance of political activists, whether we're talking about the history of Argentina, history of Chile, history of Brazil, or 2 days ago we had one of my colleagues speak about the Spanish Civil War and the Basque and the Catalonian self-determination movements, and what happens when you have somebody like Franco, or what happened when you have somebody like Mussolini basically rounding up people and killing them en masse and putting them in mass graves, or taking the children and giving them to adopted families. So this is what's happening with Saudi Arabia. It's not the first time, because there was a very big story in the 70s of Nasser Said, who was a very well-known opposition Nasserite figure who was living in Beirut, and he disappeared. And then we have many, Abdulrahman Munif, who wrote the book Cities of Salt, and I'm just inviting your listeners to read. It's available in English. It's a beautiful, beautiful 5-part series about the ways the so-called country of Saudi Arabia, we actually call it the Arabian Peninsula, because what does it mean to have a country named after a family? Okay, so he wrote about that. Abdulrahman Munif died in Jordan. I mean, there is a lot. Opposition is not possible in Saudi
especially
Arabia.
Actually, if we take, I mean, this goes way back, but I know for sure when I was covering through my other news show, during mostly the Bush George W.
Gulf War.
Administration, the war on terror, and Saudi Arabia milked that pretext, and they've arrested many dissidents, and they've executed, and they always the news
participated in rendition too, in the program of rendition.
You read about it in their news, and they say they've killed terrorists. Those are Al Qaeda members.
But look what they are doing in Yemen. Look how many people, civilian populations, they are killing day in and day out, and nobody is expressing any outcry about that. That's a crime against humanity.
So this is what Trump said about this when he was asked. He said, "I know they are," meaning the senators, talking about different kinds of sanctions. This is when he was asked if there will be any sanctions on Saudi Arabia, and he said, "But the Saudi Arabia is spending $110 billion on military equipment and on things that create jobs." Like jobs and others for this country. I don't like the concept of stopping an investment of $110 billion into the United States.
No.
So this is...
Well, this is the same thing what the Jewish Federation is doing in San Francisco, is investing in terror, is investing in injustices, is investing in destroying people's lives, is investing in killing journalists and disappearing them. There are investments. I mean, there are investments in war industries, and there are investments in peace. I remember in 1990-91, there was this whole discussion of the peace dividend. People were having serious discussions that now the Soviet Union has fell apart, the Warsaw Pact has disappeared, so the United States became the unipolar power in the world. And so a lot of people in the U.S. started to talk about something called the peace dividend. Why do we need to have Boeing factories? Why do we need to have this? Why do we need to have this? And all of a sudden they come and create again the war on terror, and they engage in one adventure after another because this war is beneficial. In 2009, I think in 2014 again, there is an Israeli group called Who Profits, and the Israeli group actually documents what Israel does to sell its military. So, for example, they put the Merkava tanks, they put all the military there, the Uzi and everything else that they use. I'm not as well versed in like weapons and so on. I prefer to think peace and to think about justice and knowledge. But they advertise them in international trade shows for weapons, and they say they write on it tested in battle. So if you want to be able to if you want to be able to sell weapons, and weapons are only made to kill, there is no other reason to have weapons. They need to market them, and in order to market them, they say it's tested in battle. So it goes back to the whole question, the connection between the peace dividend in the U.S., the possibilities of investing in peace, in social justice, in programs of education, food, health, things that are cleaning the environment, as opposed to people who are actually investing in war, in intimidation, in bullying. This is the question always gets raised. Where are your public tax dollars? Where are your tax dollars? And a lot of, remember, historically, always Palestinians say, your tax dollars at work.
Again, so I want to renew my invitation to representatives of the Jewish Community Federation and the Helen Diller Foundation right here in San Francisco to come and have a discussion on this radio show about this latest revelation we have about
so far.
Yeah. So we have less than 10 minutes, and I want to go back now to your letter on Mondowis that you wrote to address to President Wong of San Francisco State University.
What do you want me to? What would you like to know?
Besides the content.
All right. So this was a letter.
Now we have more revelation.
Yes.
And I'm sure he reads. Your letter is now a publication. All these reports, our radio show and others, we've been talking about this basically big, really scandal. It's a terrible thing. $300 million have been spent to basically attack academics and students and members of the public instead of going to do something good with it. And you have been personally affected.
Yes, and I'm asking the president of my university, who will continue to be the president until July 1st, 2019, when he steps down. I heard the news on Monday, and I wrote my statement basically saying, President Wong, you have a year to do the right thing. With this year, you can choose what kind of a legacy you're going to have. Are you going to have a legacy as the only university president who said Zionists are welcomed on campus, actually made such a declaration? Or are you going to be a president who will actually use this year boldly because San Francisco State keeps saying, think boldly, think boldly. What does bold thinking mean? Bold thinking mean actually challenging, taking risk, working for justice, educating for justice. And one of the things that I've asked him, and I mentioned it, I've asked him to issue me a public apology of the condemnation of anti-Semitism that he did back in 2013 as a result of the AMCHA initiative, which is
now on the list. They received the money.
Big funded, okay, and got more funding since 2013 because he condemned anti-Semitism without actually investigating and finding out if we were indeed engaged, if we were not engaged, and so on. It was false charges, but he went and he has not in 5 years, has not come out to actually say that these charges against me of anti-Semitism are false, or the charges against my students or against activism on campus or advocacy. That's one thing. The second thing that I'm asking President Wong to do, which is very connected to this, is we want a transparent and open investigation of everything that has happened in campus, including follow the money. Follow the money. Because from the public record that we've received, and I don't remember every single detail now, so I don't want to quote directly, but I can paraphrase, there is meetings upon meetings upon meetings with many of the people who are connected with the Jewish Federation of San Francisco. What are you meeting about? And the meetings we know, the records are all about basically suppressing us, punishing the students, worrying about what I'm doing, and so on. Many of the people who are actually became involved in the lawsuit against me, and in the tolerance of the University of David Horowitz, who put up 4 poster campaigns quoting the Canary Mission on campus in places that actually they're not even supposed to be placing. So according to the old-time place and manner policy and the new one, they shouldn't. What did the university do? The university police.
So now we know who paid for these posters, by the way.
Yes, we know who paid for them. So now the police chief of San Francisco actually admits that they had a police person call David Horowitz and said to them, next time give us heads up. I mean, it's shocking. It's shocking. It's really shocking that you would actually justify hate speech by calling it content neutral. So there is all the stuff that's going on. There is all this money. There is the continuous suppression. There is the continuously making my life, trying to make my life miserable and so on. So I would not do the kind of programming I'm doing. I would not insist on having continue the Ahmed program and build it and so on. So there is a question of silencing in terms of immediate silencing. There is silencing in terms of bullying and smearing. There is silencing in trying to ruin my career, basically ruin my career and smear my reputation among my colleagues and public and so on. There is invitation to violence by actually calling me anti-Semitic and calling me Jew hater and calling me a terrorist. And there is also on top of it direct, not indirect, direct silencing by actually trying to strangulate the Ahmed Studies program, by not allowing us to have the courses that we need to have, by actually the most recent thing is that, flip a coin. I propose courses, so I'm supposed to now flip a coin and decide whether I would like to offer a course on Arab American identity or I would like to bring a leading Muslim American feminist to speak in the class. This is the same semester. The same thing happened this semester. Cancel the Edward Said course, the course on Palestine, and replace it with a course about Arab American feminism, which is the name of my book. I mean, it's not that I do not know about it, but why are you proposing one kind of justice against another? Why are you saying we're going to cancel the Edward Said course and replace it with a course on feminism and gender and sexual justice? Why are you going to say, choose either Arab or Muslim? I don't want to choose. They're all connected with each other. Justice is indivisible, I keep saying. So all of these things are actually trying to strangulate and trying to stop the Ahmed Studies program because they have taken away our faculty lines. They have not given any operating budget or staff to the program. So what they are trying to do is basically now, the remaining thing is there is this faculty member who's trying to fight for the program and keep it going and so on. And they're trying to basically silence that and make my life so miserable. This is kind of like this war of attrition that is attacks after attacks after attacks after attacks to basically say to me, give up, let it go, because if you let it go, maybe your life will improve. And I'm saying, I'm not going to give up. I'm not let it go. I am not. I'm going to be standing and defending myself, my students, and my program, and my community against lawfare and the biggest Zionist organization groups that are being funded by the Jewish Federation. And I'm going to also defend myself, my student, and my program from the attacks by the administration that is also very intimately connected to people who are funding the same groups who are trying to silence us on campus. And we are also going to do the positive thing of actually doing our programs, teaching our students, engaging with our communities, and really advocating in a very rigorous academic and pedagogical manner for the indivisibility of justice.
Now, since they're basically this big revelation and their identity has been revealed, do you think you're going to see any changes by the administration at San Francisco State University?
Jamal, in 1964, Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act. He didn't sign it out of the goodness of his heart, because there was a huge movement that kept pushing and pushing, but there were people in his administration who were fighting against it, and he said he did it. And I said that one time to President Wang, that sometimes you really need an executive decision. You are in the leadership. When you are in the leadership, what do you do the leadership for? What do you need the leadership for? Just in order to stand and have photo opportunities and so on? You have a chance. There is, what are they going to do to you more than getting you out, basically? You're stepping down on July 1st. The university is saying he's retiring. That's not what he said. He said, I'm stepping down in his video, right? So if you're stepping down, you have a year. You have a year. Do the right thing. Do the bold thing. Stand up for justice. Stand up for actually an excellent academic program. I'm not asking you to do something outside of your comfort zone. I'm asking to do something for which you were hired in the first place as a president of an academic institution that's public, that's very precious to all of us. So that's what I hope they would. If they don't, we will continue fighting for our studies, for our students, for our programs. It's our job in life. That's what we're doing.
You've been listening to Arab Talk Radio on KPOO San Francisco. This is 89.5 FM. We'll talk to you next week. Stay tuned.